results are going missing somehow. There's a set of results that get published, and there's a set of results that go missing. And it's very difficult to get a handle on this. How do we aggregate all the information across the thousands of active researchers in any given area, everything they thought of running, everything they test on their computer? I'm not the NSA. I can't tap into everybody's computer and see everything they've done. But you'd almost have to do that to know everything they've run, right? And that's impossible. The Franco et al. Study is interesting precisely because it gives us a glimpse that we usually don't have into publication bias. So this is what they do. They're able to take advantage of what are called the TESS experiments, time-sharing experiments for the social sciences. So the TESS experiments are funded by NSF. It's a competitive program that anybody can apply for, and I'll show you the statistics soon. There's hundreds of studies that have been done here. And what the TESS experiments do is they obtain as representative samples as they can of Americans who use computers, basically. It's basically an internet-based sample, but they get a very large representative sample of Americans, and they allow you to run survey experiments. In all the test proposals, you have to include statistical power calculations. So, some people do those better than others, but at least those are all adequately powered studies. So again, we have high-quality studies that go through this refereeing process using experimental designs, nationally representative samples that are adequately powered on questions that reviewers thought were of scholarly interest. I want to do a test study. What have I been waiting for my whole career? I'm going to go do one of these. These sound amazing. And not surprisingly, it's competitive to get this funding. So there's a funding process where people put in proposals, and the best proposals get funded to add questions. What's unique here is we know everything that got funded. So we know all of the hundred-something, there's 200-something studies that were funded. We know what the title of their study was. We know who the authors are. So what Franco et al. Do is they figure out what happened to all these studies. Were they published? Were they not published? What were the results? And they're very interested in how the nature of the results affected publication. Okay, a little bit more detail. The biggest fields are political science and psychology out of the 200-something studies. There's some economics, quite a bit of sociology. But, it's a nice sort of social science-wide set of experiments. And their main question is going to be, how does the strength of a result affect its publication? So, the big concern is, are null results suppressed and strong, significant results published? And they're going to test this. So, how do they determine the publication bias, publication status? They search online. They went to authors' websites. Usually it was pretty straightforward to figure out what happened to particular projects. There might have been a published paper. There might have been a working paper. There were cases where they couldn't find the paper. And in those cases, they sent a very respectful email to the author just asking if they could get more information on the study, what were the results, et cetera. And they got really good response rates, they said. In some subset of cases, they could get information from the test site because they had some updates on the studies. So I think there were only something like 12 or 17 studies that were just missing, something like that, out of the 240. So for the bulk of the studies, they know what happened to them, but maybe 5% of the studies went missing. There's this really important distinction they come up with. There's obviously published studies. They know where those are. Among the unpublished, there's a lot that are working papers, and there's a lot that are never written up. And that distinction is going to turn out to be pretty important. In general, I think we all know, working papers are pretty visible to the profession. There's very high-profile working paper series in economics. In other fields, there may be less of a norm of working papers, but even in other fields, people often post working papers on their websites. But a paper that's never written up, that doesn't exist. Those results are basically invisible to the profession. They also code the strength of the results. This is a difficult exercise. They don't get all the data and reanalyze it. They rely on descriptions of the strength of the results given by the authors. Basically, the author's perception of the results. And they argue, well, that's probably what matters. If I think the results are strong, then I'm going to try to maybe do something with them relative to if they're mixed or null. So kind of no effect here. Mixed results, strong results, and then there's these small number of missing. In certain cases, they double-check the author's sort of coding by reading the paper themselves in a subset of cases, and 90% of the time they agree in the assessment, like this is actually a significant strong result, or a mixed result, or a null result. So what's the main finding? Null results are actually much less likely to be published. And this is more likely to be unpublished among well-powered, interesting questions with experimental designs. Imagine among sort of lower quality studies. So this is what they find. This is the full 249. Among the null findings, 31 are unwritten. So they got in touch with the author and they said, yeah, there was no effect. Never wrote it up. Only 10 are published, and then a bunch are kind of in the middle with working papers. Among the mixed findings, 10 are unwritten, 40 are published. Among the strong findings, almost all of them are written up. Only a few are unwritten, and most of them are already published. And then there's some that are unpublished, they're working papers or whatnot. But the ratio for the nulls is basically 3 to 1, and the ratio for the strong is less than 1 to 10 in the other direction, right? Just a huge difference in the likelihood of being written up for these two sets of studies, and the mixed are kind of in the middle. So it makes sense. And again, there are these missing studies which basically are unpublished. That's why they're missing. So they throw out the missings, and they throw out, there were a couple book chapters. And they say, okay, these are all sort of comparable articles. These are supposed to be journal articles, and you get, the ratios that you want here. The majority of strong studies, by far, are published. The majority of null studies are unwritten. This is kind of troubling. They push in their last paragraph or two for pre-registration and pre-analysis plans. They're like, if studies were registered, prospective studies at least were registered, at least we know they existed. If you know they exist, you can at least do what Franco et al. Did and reach out to people and ask what the results are. They had a pretty good success rate at filling in the gaps. Now, if I'm only interested in a particular literature where maybe there really are only 10 or 15 studies, it would be pretty straightforward. I'd reach out to others in my research community, and I would know that those papers existed or might have existed. They also support at the end what they call two-stage review. The idea here is there could be some sort of conditional acceptance of papers even before results are revealed. And this is controversial. This is sort of makes people scratch their heads a little bit because it's such a different process than what we're used to in terms of publishing results. Plus, so many things can sort of go wrong when you're in the field. But conceptually, it's very appealing. The idea is to say, here's my research design, here's my research question, here's the data I'm going to collect. And again, in the test studies, you kind of have to do that in your proposal anyway. And here's how I'm going to analyze the data. And I don't know what the results are, but if this is a good research hypothesis of interest to the scholarly community, they'll care either way. So that's the idea behind registered reports. But this is kind of pushing a little farther even than pre-registration of studies, because here anybody can pre-register. You don't need to go through the refereeing process and get any acceptance. You still go through the normal journal process. This changes the journal process quite a bit. And the sort of key concept here is what people are calling this in-principle acceptance, IPA, this notion that even before you collect your data, if you send this registered report to a journal, they would say, when that comes out, we're going to publish it.